There's a person you probably know, maybe it's someone in your family, maybe it's a coworker, maybe if you're being honest with yourself, it's you. Every silver lining has a cloud, every opportunity has a reason to hesitate, every good day is just the calm before something goes wrong. No matter what happens, good news, bad news, neutral news, the mind finds its way back to the dark, back to the worry, back to the worst-case scenario playing on a loop. We call these people negative thinkers. We tell them to cheer up, to look on the bright side, and when that doesn't work, we quietly decide they must enjoy being miserable, that they're choosing it, that on some level they want to suffer. But what if that's completely wrong? What if the people who think negatively aren't choosing it any more than someone with a sugar addiction is choosing to crave another piece of cake? What if the human brain is literally wired to seek out the negative, to dwell in it, to return to it like a dog returns to a bone? And what if the ancient Stoic philosophers, 2,000 years before neuroscience existed, had already figured out why and how to break free? That's what we're exploring today. Let's start with an uncomfortable truth that modern self-help culture desperately tries to avoid. Your brain was not designed to make you happy. It was designed to keep you alive. And for most of human history, keeping you alive meant one thing above everything else: detecting threats. A rustle in the grass, a stranger approaching, a food source that might be poisoned. The humans who survived were not the optimists. They were the ones whose minds were constantly scanning, cataloging, and prioritizing every possible danger in their environment. This is what researchers call negativity bias, and it is perhaps the most powerful and overlooked force shaping human psychology today. Roy Baumeister demonstrated through decades of research that bad events, bad emotions, and bad information have a significantly stronger impact on us than equally powerful good events. The brain gives negative experiences up to 5 times the psychological weight of positive ones. You can have 10 good things happen in a day and 1 bad thing, and that 1 bad thing will dominate your memory, your mood, and your thinking for hours. This isn't weakness, this is ancient hardware running in a modern world it was never designed for. The man who snaps at his partner after a stressful day isn't simply being cruel, his nervous system flagged a threat. The woman who lies awake replaying a conversation that went slightly wrong isn't being irrational. Her brain is running a survival subroutine designed to prevent that outcome from recurring. The person who can't enjoy a holiday because they keep thinking about what might go wrong when they get back isn't broken, they're running the most ancient software on Earth. But here's where it becomes a problem. We no longer live on the savannah. The threats we face today are not lions, they are emails, performance reviews, social rejection, and our brains treat all of them the same way, with the same urgency, the same alarm response, the same relentless focus that would have kept our ancestors alive but slowly destroys us in modern life. Seneca understood this 2,000 years ago. We suffer more in imagination than in reality. The mind left unchecked does not serve you, it tortures you. There's a difference between thinking about a problem and ruminating on it. Thinking about a problem is purposeful. You examine it, look for solutions, and move forward. Rumination is different. Rumination is when you replay the same painful thought, the same humiliating memory, the same anxious scenario, not to solve it, but because the brain has gotten stuck. Psychologist Susan Nolan-Hoeksema found that chronic ruminators are not more likely to solve their problems than people who don't ruminate. They are significantly more likely to develop depression, anxiety disorders, and impaired decision-making. Rumination masquerades as problem-solving while actually being the opposite, the brain convincing itself that thinking harder about the pain will eventually make it stop, when in fact the thinking is the pain. The loop works like this: something negative happens, the brain flags it as high priority. The mind returns to it repeatedly, believing each return will lead to resolution. But resolution doesn't come because the brain isn't processing the event for insight, it's reliving it for threat detection. Each repetition etches the neural pathway deeper. The thought becomes more automatic, more default. This is why some people seem trapped in their negativity even when their circumstances improve. It's not that nothing has changed. It's that the brain has built a neural superhighway to the worst-case scenario, and every new piece of information travels that road automatically. Epictetus, born a slave and living one of the harshest lives imaginable, taught that freedom was never a matter of external circumstances. A man could be in chains and free. A man could be in a palace and imprisoned by his own thoughts, his own compulsive return to what cannot be changed. Make the best use of what is in your power, he wrote, and take the rest as it happens. Now we get to the part almost nobody talks about, the part that makes negative thinking not just a habit but something closer to an addiction. Dopamine is released not just when we experience pleasure, but but when we engage in behaviors the brain has learned to associate with relief or social connection. And here's where it gets uncomfortable. Complaining triggers a mild dopamine release, not because it solves anything, but because it creates social bonding, signals shared understanding, and offers the momentary relief of externalizing an internal burden. The brain doesn't care that nothing has been resolved. It got its hit. Researchers found that habitual complaining, especially when validated by others, can literally reshape the brain. The more you complain, the more neurons wire together to make complaining the automatic response to frustration. You're not just venting, you're training. This explains something that puzzles people about chronically negative individuals, why they resist positivity so strongly. Why, when you offer a solution or a reframe, they push back, because on a neurological level, the complaint is the reward. Suggesting a solution doesn't give the brain what it's been conditioned to want. It takes it away. This is not a character flaw. It is a conditioned neurological pattern, one that, like any addiction, can be identified, understood, and systematically broken, but only if you're willing to see it clearly. In the late 1960s, Martin Seligman conducted experiments that became foundational to our understanding of depression. Dogs placed in situations where they received unavoidable electric shocks later failed to escape when escape became possible. They had learned that their actions had no effect on their circumstances. He called it learned helplessness. Human beings develop it the same way through accumulated experiences of failure, rejection, and powerlessness. Enough of these and the brain draws a conclusion: effort is futile. The world is fundamentally threatening and I am fundamentally unable to change that. Once embedded, this belief bleeds into everything. The person failed by their parents learns to expect failure from their partner. The person repeatedly overlooked at work learns to expect invisibility. The mind isn't being dramatic, it's applying past patterns to predict the future. The problem is the pattern is wrong and the mind doesn't know it. What's devastating about learned helplessness is how invisible it is to the person experiencing it. They don't feel like someone who has given up. They feel like a realist, someone who has learned through hard experience how the world actually works. Their negativity doesn't feel like distortion. It feels like clarity. Epictetus addressed this directly. His conclusion was not that powerlessness is permanent, but that we have radically misidentified what we have power over. We do not control what happens to us, we control our response. We control the narrative we build around events, and in that space between event and response lies everything. The Stoics had a practice that sounds like the opposite of what you'd expect from a philosophy about inner peace. They called it Premeditatio Malorum, the premeditation of evils. Before an important event, a Stoic would deliberately imagine everything that could go wrong, not to spiral into anxiety, but to neutralize it. By consciously visiting the worst-case scenario, by examining it clearly and without flinching, the mind loses its power to use that scenario as a weapon. Modern research on defensive pessimism echoes this almost exactly. Psychologist Julie Norham found that for certain individuals, mentally rehearsing negative outcomes doesn't increase anxiety, it reduces it, because the brain isn't worried about the future because it wants to suffer. It's worried because it wants to be prepared. Give it preparation and the worry loses its purpose. After imagining the worst, the Stoic asks a second question, the one that separates philosophy from catastrophizing. What, if anything, can I do about this? If something is within your control, you act. If it is not, you release it. Not because releasing is easy, but because continuing to grip it changes nothing. It only destroys the present. Marcus Aurelius, ruling the largest empire in the world through plague, war, and betrayal, wrote these words to himself as a private discipline: "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength, not as a performance, as a practice." Understanding the psychology of negative thinking is not enough. Knowledge without practice is philosophy without purpose. So here is what the practice actually looks like. First, observe before you judge. When a negative thought arises, don't suppress it. Observe it, name it. My brain is flagging this as a threat. This single act of metacognition interrupts the automatic loop. It creates the gap Epictetus was pointing to. Second, interrogate the story. Every negative thought is a story and stories can be examined. Is this a fact or an interpretation? Is this a realistic assessment or the worst-case narrative my brain defaults to? You're not replacing darkness with blind optimism. You're replacing it with accuracy. Third, distinguish what is yours. When anxiety rises, ask, is this within my control? If yes, what is my next action? If no, what is the cost of continuing to hold it? Most of what we suffer over is not within our control. Most of our suffering is optional. Fourth, move toward what you're avoiding. Apply for the position you're sure you won't get. Have the conversation you're dreading. Every act of moving toward what the negative mind wants to avoid is a vote against the helplessness the brain has learned. And fifth, be patient with the person but ruthless with the pattern. Negative thinking is built over years. It will not dissolve in a week. But the brain that learned helplessness can learn agency. The brain that built a highway to catastrophe can build a new road not by pretending the old road doesn't exist but by choosing daily not to travel it. The person in your life who thinks negatively is not choosing misery. They are someone whose ancient survival hardware is running too hot in a world it wasn't built for. They are stuck in a loop and most of them don't even know the loop exists. And if that person is you, if you recognized yourself somewhere in this video, hear this clearly: you are not broken. You are not weak. You are not destined to see the world through darkness forever. You are someone whose brain learned something, and anything the brain has learned, it can unlearn. The Stoics never promised a life without suffering. What they promised was something far more durable than happiness: the capacity to remain steady, to meet whatever comes, the good, the devastating, the mundane, with a mind that is clear and a will that is disciplined. That is not toxic positivity, that is not blind optimism, that is something far older and far harder. That is the Stoic way, and it begins, as all things do, with a single thought examined honestly for the very first time.